Okay, we're back with the Crownsman Show. I'm your host, Jared Downey, and today we have got a company that has worked from the mining side right into the space side with NASA, so lots to cover. It's L&H Industrial. We're going to have Dustin Roush. He's a third-generation owner. We'll definitely touch on that in the show, and the Director of Business Development for L&H. And we have Tyler Thomas. He's the Product Line Director, so we're going to be looking at different products, different projects that they've done, and also the approach when you get into this really specialized manufacturing and production. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Great to have you on.
Thanks. Good to be here.
Thanks for having us, Jared.
Looks like we've got some hunting, some rodeo in the background. So you're speaking my language. So yeah, where are you both based out of?
Well, I'm based out of our corporate office here in Gillette, Wyoming, and Tyler, he's up in our location up in Sheridan, Wyoming.
Okay. So just Dustin, I'm going to start with you. So can you give me a little bit of that overview of L&H, just from where you're based in your headquarters, but you have a global reach, and just sort of that overview of the company before we dig into some things.
Yeah, so our corporate headquarters are based out of Gillette, Wyoming, and we're mainly we do a lot of mechanical spares for the mining industry. That's kind of our core business, and our niche in that is we'll go into a customer if they have an issue that somebody doesn't really want to dive into, another company doesn't want to dive into. We'll go in, use our engineering expertise, take a look at design, take a look at the safety factors that play into that, and take a project, review it. If we think that we can improve it, then we'll go in and we'll make the modification and go through the whole design process. And I think the reason that we can do that very effectively is just because we are a smaller company. So we're more nimble, we're more willing to react to customers' needs, and we are not an OEM. And I think where the OEMs get in a little bit of a trouble is if they claim, hey, we got an issue on this part. They've got a fleet of customers that own that machine. And so then they have to turn around and warrant, say 100 pieces, to where we can go in with a customer and say, hey, we'll fix that problem for you, get it fixed. And then hopefully we can sell that to other customers. So we can basically take that from cradle to grave. A lot of iterations go through with that, Gen 1, Gen 2, and we always basically engineer, manufacture, do the installation ourselves, and then we monitor and we'll come back and make some modifications if needed. And then we also have our Me Too product is what we call it. So if the base design, the material is correct right from the beginning, there's no sense in changing it, right? So it's good enough, and we'll manufacture that as well. So that's kind of our core business.
Our sponsors for this episode are Zero Nox. Zero Nox is the global leader in electric powertrain solutions, microgrids, and clean technology. They provide a platform for clean energy technology to come to market through powertrain solutions, development partnerships, and electrification kit solutions for conversions, all powered by Zero Nox. Their mission is to empower communities through sustainable innovation as they partner with some of the world's leading OEMs to solve challenges across multiple continents with cleaner and higher performing technology. Empowering a clean, innovative, and higher performing future without compromise. Learn more at zeronox.com. Next up, we have OptiSize. OptiSize is a leading-edge geophysical acquisition design and software company. OptiSize provides innovative seismic survey designs utilizing the latest field technology and optimizing for advanced processing and quantitative interpretation techniques. OptiSize's mission is to bring sustainable exploration solutions to energy development with their custom land footprint reduction technology, EcoSize. EcoSize enables operators to focus on reducing their environmental and greenhouse gas footprint while imaging all their subsurface targets and reducing costs. Please visit them at optisize.com to learn more. Next up, we have Dayquip. Dayquip specializes in the design and manufacturing of attachments for all makes and models of compact excavators, wheel loaders, crawler dozers, and articulated dump trucks. You can choose from any of their engineered attachments, or they can design and build to your specifications. All of their products can be shipped anywhere in North America, hassle-free. If you don't see it, just ask and they will build it. Check out their website at dayquip.com or email them info@dayquip.com, or you can also call toll-free 1-844-882-8008 for sales. Next up, we have Edge Eyewear. Edge designs stylish, quality, and affordable safety eyewear that's as fit for the weekend as the workday. Edge safety glasses and sunglasses are ANSI or CSA compliant, come ready with modern technology, and are comfortable enough to offer all-day protection. And of course, they've been delivering a better safety glass since 1998. You can visit edgeeyewear.com to learn more and save 20% with code CROWN20. Last but not least, PowerZone equipment. When you need a specialized team of world-class engineers for your oil and gas, pipelines, dewatering, or any fluid handling needs, you want to visit powerzone.com. In addition to their inventory of rebuilt pumps, motors, engines, they also have an amazing team to design and engineer your systems, no matter the challenge, no matter the location. Get in the zone with PowerZone. Visit them at powerzone.com.
You said you're sort of small enough to be nimble, but you've got quite a reach too. You're down. I think you have several offices down into Canada, the US, into Latin America. Can you sort of talk about being in that sweet spot of being? And it's interesting because it's sort of, I think, a place a lot of companies would love to get to, where you're small, you still have that. There's not a whole bunch of bureaucracy, but you still have that capability. Can you talk a little bit about sort of developing to becoming that company?
Yeah, so that started back in the, I'd say, mid 90s, and I wasn't in the company back then, but in the mid 90s, we brought on some mechanical engineers and we started dissecting, because these mining companies that were here local in the Thunder Basin coal industry, they were going through and they're having issues, and there's nobody, the OEMs would solve the problem, but you got to remember, those are big companies. And so back to your bureaucracy, red tape of taking a product and saying, hey, we've got an issue and we're going to run it up the flagpole, make sure, and then go through the R&D and so on and so forth. So with us, we started that in the 90s. We started manufacturing parts, started competing against the OEM and the other aftermarket companies, and learned very quickly that if we can come in from a design standpoint and a metallurgical standpoint and identify the key issues and go through a redesign, manufacture it ourselves, again, do the installation. So that model out of the Thunder Basin, or Gillette, Wyoming, that spawned basically engineering and sales locations through North and South America. So it's a model that seems to work very well for us, and we continue to develop new territories and or countries that specifically goes into looking at customer issues and trying to solve those problems. So, I don't know if you guys remember I think it was BASF. They used to have that commercial that says, hey, we don't make the car you drive, we make the car that you drive better. That's kind of how we look at ourselves. Like we don't manufacture the equipment that you guys are operating, but we go and we make it run a little bit better.
Tyler, to bring you into this, and I want to kind of pivot into the mining side overview, just touching on some of the projects that you do. But when we first talked, getting ready for this interview, you mentioned about sort of that find a partner approach. Can you sort of talk a little bit about that approach and how it ties, specific focusing on the mining side? We're going to get into the power gen and the space side as well. But just sort of your approach on the mining, looking for the right partners when you're doing these projects for them.
Yeah, you bet. Like Dustin mentioned, we want to find that partner because we don't always get it right the first time. We need somebody who can be that guinea pig and try, work with us to develop a new design and also try it for us so that we can install it and then we can also test it. Then we can come back, we monitor it, come back and make design iterations to that. One of the things that has been kind of our bread and butter, like Dustin mentioned, on the electric rope shovel side is our undercarriage. And we're on some of those undercarriage components, we're in our second and third generation of those components, making them better. The machines are always getting bigger, so we've got to adapt to that. The competition is always, everybody's upping their game, trying to compete. And where we're kind of positioned in that market is we're never going to be the cheapest. We don't want to be the cheapest, but what we want to do is last the longest and be the lowest cost per hour. So that's where finding that partner, developing that product, and bringing it to market, and then scaling it across other customers to show that product is going to last longer.
So I guess two parts is, one, how are you doing that with the undercarriage is one part, but then also how are you communicating that to a customer when they're coming to you? Do they already know, okay, we're not looking for the cheapest here, we're trying to lower our cost per hour? Do they already have that in their mind, or is that a communication thing?
Yeah, so the first part of that, how we're doing that. So geometry is a big thing. With our engineers, we look at the weak points of maybe the OEM design, or our case, maybe it was the first generation of our design. Maybe it lasted a long time, but we want to make it a little bit better. And then we start from the geometry. We also look at the metallurgy. And I think that's another key point, that we really look for partners, not only on our customer side, but on our vendor side. So we work with our vendors really closely to develop that metallurgy and making sure it is the highest quality, and that they're following guidelines that we can trust, so that we can provide a high quality component to our customers. And the second part of that question is, it is communicated. Some customers that have been a partner from day one, they understand where we're at and they understand what they're getting from L&H. But at the same time, when we're working with a new prospective customer, we do have to communicate that, and we want to be open and upfront with them about that, so that it cuts down. It's not a waste of our time or a waste of their time. They know what they're getting on the front end with L&H.
Just again, I ask a lot of layman questions on this show, but so when you're doing things like the loader hydraulic gearbox or the rope shovel undercarriages, are you upgrading them? Are you rebuilding them? Are you replacing them? Is it a mixture of all of it? What's sort of that setup?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we'll rebuild, and right now rebuilding is coming back more so than ever with the supply chain struggles, with the situation that's going on in the world today. So we're noticing that more and more just with lead times. So we will rebuild those. We will incorporate some of the upgrades that we've designed into those rebuilds of the OEM components, but then we will also design and build and manufacture new, where more or less we are the OEM for that component. That is our design. That is something that we came up with, in partnership with a customer likely. So we'll do both.
Going on to the power gen side, can you quickly talk about your work in that? Because again, if you've approached L&H from the mining side, maybe the power gen side is not the first thing that comes to mind. So can you talk a little bit about projects you've done there?
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, you talk about kind of a couple of opposites there with the Powder River Basin, the coal industry that Dustin was talking about, and then wind turbines. So a little bit opposite, but what it is that we're scaling and taking our mechanical and metallurgical expertise and adapting it to a new industry. So that's all we're doing with that. We've developed some technology, done a lot of R&D on rebuilds of the main shafts in those wind turbines, and that helps the customer. the life of those isn't always predictable. So when they do come out and they have a failure on a bearing on a wind main shaft, we can take that into our shop. We've developed a procedure that will bring that back to as good of new, and be a confident rebuild that can go back into service, rather than some of the past technology that was being used. It was just a band-aid. It wasn't a solid fix. So we've really, kind of the same thing that we've done on the mining side, is try to make it better.
Dustin, on that side though, when you go in, you started, 20 years ago, I'm thinking L&H wasn't doing in this industry, of course. So how do you end up in that industry? Does someone come to you? It's through market, or, a referral? Market?
Yeah.
What's that process?
Well, that's a good question. So basically what happened on that situation is, the mining industry as a whole, we had a major slowdown. And what that did to our company is it forced us to look outside of the box. So we basically ran around and tried to find a guy or a person that was well known in that industry. And we found that person, we brought him in, hired him out, made him a product line manager. And it's always, I'd like to say that we're geniuses and we can go bring in a new product line and we can fire it up and get it going. But it's always a long road to get it to where it's a viable product line. And it was about a 2-year process, and we finally started getting in these wind shafts. And then we have to go through this iteration of machining, welding, building up, remachining, and trying to find a process that works for that industry. So basically it was a diversification move because the mining industry was so slow at the time that we had to look outside of just the mining industries. And that brought on, you got power generation now, Department of Defense, space. So we're basically looking at and developing new product lines all the time, we're getting into new industries because of that slowdown.
So does that really change the way that L&H even approached business development in a long-term way as well then?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So now when we look at product lines or business development in particular, it's really a market research and seeing if there's something in there that we can add value to the customer or to that customer base. So we spend a lot of time on the front end researching and making sure that there's a sweet spot in there for us, because it just doesn't make, we don't always get that right. We've thrown good money after bad, but in general, it's something that we spend more time now researching the market, going to trade shows, talking with potential customers, talking with competitors, and before we make that move to actually invest in a person. And usually it lands on a person. You find the right person and just give them a key task, say boots on the ground, go figure this out for us, and we'll fund you, but here's your timeline that you need to stay within. And that seems to be very, very effective. I think that the mistakes that we made in the past is, hey, let's go look at this. But we had somebody dabbling in that all the time. And now
desk sort of approach.
Yeah. So that seems to be a big improvement that we've made over time. And it's not an original thought, it took some time to realize it, and then get to reading books and recognize that somebody's already done it and they're doing it very well. So we just mimic that.
Well, it comes to mind, GE had that approach. When you try something new, put your best people on it. And I think one of the approaches to that, and I'm curious of your feedback on it, is that it also lets the organization know, even people that aren't involved in that project, know that you're taking this seriously, that you're putting someone on it that does cost money, that is important to the company. And so there's automatically everybody sort of knows this is an important thing to us.
Yeah, absolutely. When we make that commitment to bring somebody on, we have a introduction phase, kind of try to get them immersed in the company, have them come to corporate headquarters, and then go hit all the facilities and get them immersed into our culture. Not only does that help that person get up and going, but it also helps everybody understand that, hey, we're going to make this investment. This is what it looks like. Here's what we hope to gain out of it. And we have, with our marketing team, we have some quarterly updates that go out from our president, Mike Wandler. And he'll do these quarterly and kind of discuss what's going on in the company, what direction we're going. So it seems to help get people's mind wrapped around. And what's amazing about it is you start doing that, and it makes your employees start looking at these other industries, and they'll start bringing stuff to us because they want to help out, which is really cool. So
yeah, how do you end up working with NASA? That's up.
Well, so that was through a company, ME Electrometal, and their foundry, and they poured the original crawler transport shoes. So the crawler transport takes the shuttle out to the launch pad, and so it's, you know, we've worked with ME back and forth. You know, they're very large foundry, and we had a connection in there, and they brought that opportunity to us. And when that whole deal started, I think they said they had like 180 some potential companies that NASA was looking at to utilize. Yeah, so then they go through this vetting process, and it came down to us and I think a company out of Alabama, I want to say. And what we did is the scope of the project is basically to take the underworks, or the crawler propel portion of the crawler transport, and we're going to rebuild that whole underworks. And so what we did is we took a mock bore. So we built this, because a lot of this is welding and machining and mechanical. So we built up a mock bore, a mock setup, and then NASA came out. There was 13 people that were involved, and we literally would weld up a bore, and then we'd have stop points. They would come in and do an inspection, and then we'd set up our bore and bars, and we'd machine it. We'd have stop points, and they'd remeasure everything. And that was a 3-day event. There was 13 people here from NASA. That was a 3-day event, and they basically qualified us, and they sat in our boardroom for about a day and a half discussing as to whether or not we were qualified to do this job. We got the word that, you know, we were awarded that project, which was incredible.
This is before. You haven't been rewarded the project yet when you're doing this.
Right. So we're going through a phase because they got to make sure. I mean, look, that project was 1,300 components is what we built. And when you're dealing with the United States government, you got to get it right. I mean, it's got the very, very tight tolerances. And especially where it's the NASA project. So there's 1,300 components that went with that. And then the documentation on that project alone, we had basically 18,000 documents verifying specs, material, just cradle to grave. I mean, it was an extensive, heavy engineered project that our guys did an amazing job on. And so when they sat down and went through that whole process, they said, yep, you're qualified to do it. And they awarded us that job. And then we moved a field crew out of Gillette, Wyoming, got them down there to Florida, and they stayed down there. I believe it was an 8-month project. So they disassembled the track system, the propel system, jacked the machine up, and then went to measuring and welding and machining out the bores. And there was phase 1, phase 2, and phase 1 was basically fixing the kitty corner sides of the track frames. So they jacked them up and they fixed those, set them down, they wrapped track, and then they had NASA came in with their guys and they inspected everything, make sure it was good to go. And then once they verified that, then we went to the opposite corners and jacked that side up and rebuilt that. So that project actually started in 2011 and it ended in 2015.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want
So it's
to,
pretty cool.
yeah, it's amazing. I want to understand though. I mean, were you, if I went today to bid on a project for NASA and they told me 18,000 pages of documentation in the way our company's set up right now, I'd go, that is absolutely wonderful. And I hope someone enjoys doing that. I wouldn't even be able to look at it. How did you understand the scope of, I know this is kind of a strange question, but did you understand what you were getting yourself into
Not
on this?
not at first. I mean, honestly, we didn't. So we bid the job, and then some very kind folks came back to us that that we bid the job, and they said, no, you might want to look at your bid, then the scope, and rethink about the man hours that this whole deal is going to take. And so our initial bid, basically, that they knew like, hey, these guys aren't used to working for NASA. And so we came back, and it really took you know, a gentleman that works for us. He's an engineer by trade. He's a job coordinator secondarily at the time. And he spent a ton of time, and he looked at that project, and he says, I think I can do it. If I assemble the right team around me, I think I can do it. So he took the helm from a project management standpoint. He took the helm on that side, and then basically brought in picked out some of the engineering group, and then from the field service and manufacturing, or the production side of the business, then we had you know, guys like Jason Wandler, or Jason Percifield, who's ran our field service crew at that point, and he took that side of it, and they just meshed that thing together, and it was a group of people that made that happen. So it's really, those guys need recognition for that, because without somebody driving the helm and looking at that and saying, I think I can take that on, and then at the time the ownership group to trust him and back him up, because it was a big liability at the time. You know, it's either a big success or a big flop, and it was a huge success. So
Yeah,
At that time too, Dustin.
yeah, I should say congratulations on it. And Tyler, I wanted to bring you in on now, kind of pivoting into bring back into multiple industries, is how different is the mining sector from the power gen to a NASA project? You're dealing with, you know, space work. When you're now, I don't know if how many industries sort of you're dealing with at a time, but how much different is it one industry from the other?
Well, I think there's a fair bit of difference. Like Dustin said, you know, the paperwork side, the administrative side of things. But I think what you notice throughout this entire conversation and podcast is that it all goes back to our core competencies, and that's what we built on. So our engineering expertise, our metallurgical expertise. So in that sense, you know, I think there are a lot of similarities there, and that's why we've been able to be successful and find those niches, what Dustin was talking about, that makes sense for us, and carve out that little area for us in those industries.
Do you have an approach? And I know you touched on a little bit, but I just want to kind of go back to it. Do you have an approach that when a project comes up, there's these first steps, this is what we're going to do, this is what everybody knows is the process, or does it change per industry, per project, per team? How do you deal with that?
Yeah, in general, a lot of times, like we were talking earlier, the customer will come to us with a problem. Maybe they're having more maintenance time than they think. It's a safety issue, something like that. They come to us with a problem, and we work through that with them and make sure that it makes sense and that it will fit us, and that we're going to be able to do a great job at solving that problem for them. And then obviously look at the market, like Dustin had mentioned, do a lot of market research. You know, are other customers having the same problem? Can we scale this solution across several customers? So we always try to go back to those questions to kind of start the process. And then it goes through our engineering group. Obviously, they work back and forth. If that customer's still having those problems, they'll run it through their new design phase, do the FEAs on it, make sure we don't have any high stress areas, maybe go back to the customer at that point in time, have a presentation, get some feedback, and then finalize it, manufacture the component. Once we get it out to the customer, we don't want to leave it there. We always want to monitor it, get that feedback, get that data, because there are a lot of times where we need to go back and make some changes to make it a good product. So again, the importance of having the partner for a customer, and then having a company in L&H that is really nimble and flexible and can work out those issues very quickly if we have them, in perfecting that component.
Is there a project too big or too small sort of evaluation? And also in the sense that this is a one-off, it's not likely going to happen again. Do you assess projects that you're taking on to say, is this something you mentioned like can be applied to different customers? Does that get involved, or do you just go for the job that you're doing for the customer and then see if it's a scalable thing that you can expand?
No, you're right. Definitely try to work that out on the front end, right? We don't want to dive into something that doesn't make sense for us down the road, and maybe it's something different, an underlying reason. We don't just want to go into that blindly. So we try to do the research. The too big or too small thing, I think there's always things that we look at. At the time, that NASA project was a big deal. And I think at the time, the ownership was it was just, another project that maybe initially we were wasting our time on, but you had that group of people who believed in it and were passionate about it. So in that sense, there are projects that are out of our wheelhouse and we need to recognize that, but we're continually growing. So we're always going to evaluate that.
It's a very interesting balance finding that. Dustin, going back to you, I mean, starting to look at sort of that expansion side of the company, what are some of the things you're looking at? I mean, I know monitoring's obviously a huge thing now. We do, especially on the Mining Now side, we do a lot of shows about it. I'm sure that's something that's coming across in front of you, and, taking on new partners and distribution, all these sort of things. Can you talk a little bit about your approach to that?
Yeah, so especially on the monitoring side, I mean, the whole world is going to the Internet of Things. And so we have a project, we're actually in the infancy right now. We're getting that set up. We're going to start, I think, on fixed plant equipment. So a lot of mineral processing type of equipment. We're going to start there because I should say, really look at legacy machines. Again, with the current supply chain issues that people are having, our customers are being forced to run legacy equipment, older equipment, but they want all the bells and whistles. So now we're coming in and we're saying, okay, we can set these certain deals up. We'd be able to do some remote monitoring and assist you with your maintenance practices. Again, that's in the infancy. We're going that direction. And then as far as distribution, we're always trying to set up new customers, new distributors. Interestingly enough, I don't know, about a year and a half ago, I got a distributor over in Russia set up, and that's been interesting, given the
little bit disruptive.
Yeah, a little bit disruptive. So sometimes I bet wrong, I mean, I bet on the wrong horse, and they're great. The sad thing is they're great people. They're a great distributor for us, but it's been interesting. So
yeah. I mean, my sister-in-law is Russian. It's been quite hard on people that that have they have very different belief system than what their country is deciding to go with. So, but when but I guess you have to, though. Obviously you can't predict the future, but it is about finding good people. How do you even go about that, though? Finding these people around the world to work with. I mean, how do you even assess that?
Look, again, I'm not going to say that we have a secret sauce, but here's the thing: is people is what make things move in our industry or in any industry. It's the person that you're working with, whether they're an employee or if they're a partner from a distribution manufacturing side. People make the world go round. So a lot of it's a gut feel, and then a lot of it is just asking people that are in the industry of who's who is in the zoo, and then asking the customers. I mean, asking a customer, I've been in situations where we go to another country, we make a trip, we get some leads, we'll make a trip, we'll run around and just talk to the customers and like, well, who's a really good distributor and why? Or who's a good company that you guys appreciate working with and why? And that's just simple, plain, easy to do. Does it always work out? No, but in general, let the customer lead you to the distributor, the manufacturer, the product. And if you listen to your customer base, it's not rocket science. They'll get you there. So
when you're dealing with someone, going back to NASA though, do you learn processes that you can then implement on that expansion strategy? Sort of that horrible word of bureaucracy, but do you learn to implement a few steps that can safeguard against some maybe mistakes that you've made in the past?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're always adapting and learning along the way, and we're that's the interesting thing, is all these new industries that you start to dive into, and then once you go to working with them, they all have their little nuances, and then you can pick and piece this deal together and put it into a business strategy. And I don't want to make that last statement sound like this is simple and this is the only thing that we go off, but I also believe that companies can get caught up in using matrices and having everything narrowed down into this tight, nice little bundle, and if they don't hit these boxes, then we're not going to work with them. I do believe that you can have some companies that on paper look very attractive, and it's like, man, that's the prettiest girl in the dance. Why don't we go try to date her? And then what you find out is they're big and they look really cool, but culturally, or maybe not even culturally, but just personality and relationship wise, it's not gonna, we don't have the same morals, we don't have the same ethics, we don't have. And if you don't have those basic things, that the basic trust, they could be the prettiest girl at the dance and you don't want to dance with her. So that's that basic thing of trust and morals and values, that typically takes you a lot further than a spreadsheet or making sure everybody checks all these boxes.
And sort of the art is weaving them all together to make that final decision and being willing to live with a mistake. I think that really isn't that really half the battle, is just being willing to know I'm going to do my absolute best, and only you can know what your absolute best is, but then be willing to go, yeah, I made a mistake.
Made a mistake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, Dustin, I want to stay with you for a moment, because it says right on your title on LinkedIn, you're third generation owner and director of business development. Can you give a little bit of backstory? I mean, 3 generations, I said before we got on the air, that's not nothing. 3 generations. Right. So can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So my grandfather actually started this company in 1964, and originally it was a small machine shop. The original owner of the machine shop had gone bankrupt, and my grandfather went back to the family, and then plus some business partners, he bought that business out of bankruptcy and started L&H Industrial. And L&H stands for Leon, who was my grandfather, Leon Wadler. And then H was for Hank Barney. And Hank was actually an underwater welder that was in the Navy. And then somehow he found himself in Gillette, Wyoming. during that time and just really liked my grandfather. He's retired out, but he liked my grandfather. So he helped fund that business. And they were working in the oil industry. That's what they did. I mean, it was a boom town. It was a rough town, and they were building rigs, and everything was going gangbusters. He was making really good money. And then the 80s hit, and he just built the shop where we're currently at, corporate shop, and it was a bust. And he almost went bankrupt. And through that, he started working for the mining industry. And basically, he got it to a point in, I'd say, the 90s, I think early 2000, maybe it was 99 when he sold out to my uncles. And there's 3 uncles at the time that were vested in the business. And the oldest of the boys, he sold out in 2001. And Jeff and Mike Wandler, Jeff took care of sales and Mike took care of the production side. And they really took this business on it, along with other people. But they really took this business and grew it globally, got the manufacturing in, got processes, computer systems, all this stuff. They really took that company and grew it. And my grandfather built the foundation. My uncles grew the business. And right now, the way we currently have it structured is Jeff Wandler, he sold out in 2017. So I took his position and oversee, sales and marketing, business development. And then my cousin Jason he's Jason Percifield. He is CEO of, and basically takes care of all the production side of the business. And then Mike Wandler, he's president and majority shareholder of the business. So we're very proud of it. We're very family oriented. And I think that's why it comes back to when we're trying to find people to work with, whether it be vendors, distributors, when we're looking for employees, it's that basic, hey, this is who we are. We're family oriented. We've got a culture. We have a culture here. And if you can't match up with that, then this probably isn't going to work out. So we leave it. Some things are very sophisticated in our business, but there's some basic things as far as trust and culture that has taken us a long ways. And I think people appreciate, our employees especially appreciate working for a family business, because we treat those guys like they're our family. So
it's safe to say you don't subscribe to these business consultants that say never work with family.
No, it's funny. So I don't know if you can tell from the background, like we've got a ranch on my dad's side of the family. This L&H Industrials on my mom's side of the family, and they're polar opposites. So the beautiful thing about L&H Industrial is we have succession planning. We sit down and talk about things monthly, quarterly, and it's very open, and it's been very successful. And on the ranching side, everybody's closed-lipped, we're independent, and it just cracks me up, the difference in how businesses operate. And it's fine.
I know exactly what you mean.
So anyways, it's really cool to see both perspectives. But anybody out there that's listening that has a family business, I mean, that succession planning and getting everybody on the right page and talking about who's in charge of what and how is this going to run, it's imperative for the long term. And I think that's the only reason that we're successful, being in the 3rd generation. The other thing I will say too that I think makes us successful is my grandfather has, I think there's 13 grandchildren, and 3 of us are in the business. And rite of passage is basically you have to bring something to the company that is of value, that grows the business. And if you can get that accomplished, then you get share ownership. So it's you got to earn your salt is what we always tell people.
Yeah, that's yeah. Tyler, going back, I have to ask you, I'm gonna put you on the spot here. How does that how do you sort of integrate that into sort of your approach to working with a company that has this, you're working in the high tech space, but there's also this family dynamic and also the sort of that value system. I mean, we've all seen companies that I'm just going to say it, they're just absolutely no soul. It just,
Mhm.
and there's not that there's not good people there, but they become a corporation and this is who they are. And it's not even really a size thing. It's more of an approach thing. So how does that, sort of affect you, having that sort of that two worlds, as a company?
Yeah, personally, I mean, for working for LNH as a family, just all the values and culture line up with my personal values and culture, like Dustin was talking about. So it's a really easy transition, and I think it's just part of you. And I think those people that come into LNH that do gel and integrate well stick around for a long time. LNH doesn't have a lot of turnover in their key group and their core group, and that's great. It helps with growth and everything else. And funny enough that my wife works at LNH and my dad also works at LNH, so have a family component there as well, and all have been around for a long time now. So it's great to see that and be included in that and see LNH grow throughout the years.
I'm starting to feel left out. I feel like I need to come to Wyoming.
Yeah.
No, thank you both. Thank you both for coming on the show. And I will say, right when I first connected with Brittany to talk about you being the guest on the show, one thing I really found right off the bat was, even in her approach, and I can always tell sort of a company's values by who that first person you talk to, no matter what their position is. And what I found right away is that I was getting asked questions and I was getting the opportunity to ask them. Sometimes you're almost getting challenged with questions, especially when you're asking people to come on in front of a big audience and all that. And there just seemed to be that sort of that curiosity and that desire to get real knowledge and then just talking to both of you and getting to know you. It's a very interesting company. I'm very glad that you're on the show and just talking about these projects. It's great for the industry as well. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, everyone. Well, thank you for watching. We'll put plenty of links to LNH if you're watching on YouTube or on LinkedIn. There'll be plenty of tags to follow them and both our guests. Thank you to all our sponsors. And thank you to Gowdy, who is off camera right now, trying to keep everything rolling along. Please keep watching. Please keep on suggesting guests. There's just, if you go into a LinkedIn filter and search out any industry, there's literally thousands of companies. So we haven't even scratched the surface yet. Thank you for all the suggestions. Please keep watching. We will see you on the next episode of The Crownsman Show.